What is up, homies? Welcome back to another review from Heroes Reforged. This is a long-anticipated review. We are reviewing The Batman today from director Matt Reeves. Before we get into the review, I want to quickly let you know you can check out patreon.com/heroesreforged, where we have reactions to so many shows that we've been watching over the course of the last year. We are in the process of doing X-Men, the animated series right now. Very soon we will be starting Arcane. There's plenty more stuff coming to Patreon, so check it out. Links are down in the description below, along with a link to our official merch store. You can get some fun Heroes Reforged swag.
Let us know if you want a Mexican shirt. I have a cool design that I want to sell, and
let us know.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be too braggadocious, but we have been told that we're the best people on the internet to watch anything with. So, you know, check out our Patreon.
We didn't say it. You guys.
You said it, not us. You said it, not us. We are going to start this review with a quick non-spoiler discussion of what our initial thoughts of the movie were. So if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. We won't spoil it right off the top. We will let you know when we go into spoilers. It is a long film. We will go through as much as we possibly can in the amount of time that we have, but we will definitely let you know when we switch over to spoilers. We tried our hardest to try to get into an early screening for this movie, which is why this review is coming out a little bit later. We had no success to be able to go see this movie together, so we went and ventured out on our own to see it. But we have all finally seen this film, and I'm very excited to talk about it because I think everyone's gonna have some thoughts about this movie. Augustine and I saw this in IMAX. Hector, did you see it in Dolby or IMAX?
No, I think just regular old shitty theater. So
shitty 2D. All right.
$1 theater.
Hector, if you want to start first, give us your non-spoiler thoughts.
I don't want to start. Adam, I want you to start.
Okay. Adam, you start. You start. You've had a bat boner for days, and we need to talk about it.
We want to let you express yourself, friend. Express yourself. Go ahead.
Okay, so going into this movie really quick, what I really had hoped for from a Batman movie was I wanted something that was kind of a healthy mix of Batman the Animated Series and the first Tim Burton Batman movie. I love that first Tim Burton Batman movie, and I know that it comes with some baggage of issues, but I loved the look of the movie, and I love the look of Gotham City, and I love the look of Batman and that whole world, and a lot of that carries over into Batman Returns. That being said, this was a Riddler story, and when they pitched it being a Zodiac type of film, I got really excited because I thought this is a really interesting way to do the Riddler. This is a really interesting way to really explore Batman's detectiveness. So for all those reasons, I really feel like I got a Batman movie that I was really looking forward to. So I really, really enjoyed the movie. The runtime for me didn't bother me at all. Like I was totally cool with it. And as someone who also really loves horror and noir and detective stuff and thriller, like this literally just dug its claws like right into my body and was like, this is for you. So I loved it for that. So I had a really, really, really good time watching this movie. It's not without its flaws, but I think for me, the good outweighed the bad, and I had an amazing time watching this film. So yeah, I really, really loved it.
It was a thrill watching this movie next to Adam. I was just, I bet, so into it, so into every moment. And I was too. I liked this movie quite a bit. I think this fresh take on Batman, well, I don't know. I don't even know if to call it fresh, because can you call Batman fresh? You can't. Right? Like Batman is Batman through and through. It feels fresh and new because it's a Batman that doesn't act like the Batman that we already know. It's a Batman who is still very much struggling. He's mourning. You can clearly tell that he's mourning. You can clearly tell that he does not have his plan together fully. And so, yeah, there are some moments in here in which he shows his vulnerability, not just as like Bruce Wayne, but as Batman, and his not readiness for some things. And I think that was great. And they really made some great connections to why he's doing what he's doing, with some story plots that we'll reveal later. But overall, I think it was a really great idea. Cinematically, the score, everything else was like 100% on point. The visuals were beautiful. The music was amazing. That car chase sequence was just mind blowing for me. There was just something about it that didn't 100% click with me, and I'm not sure I've identified that one thing just yet. But it's definitely not Pattinson, because he is an amazing Batman. It's definitely not Zoe Kravitz, because she killed it. Like every actor on this was just on point. So I'm still trying to find why I didn't love it. And maybe, who knows, maybe by the end of this review, we'll figure it out, because that's why I talk with you guys, to really mull through what's going on with this. But Hector, what do you think?
I think you guys both bring up a bunch of great points, and that's why I like also just chatting about this kind of stuff with you guys, because it ends up being a great introspection into myself, into why we like some things and why we don't like some things. I'll say that for my experience, my kind of non-spoiler thoughts are, I'm glad you guys are bringing up the filmmaking and the acting and those levels of production. Everything is firing on all cylinders. It is a well-made movie. It is so well directed, so well acted. I think I remember feeling like there was some stuff I didn't love about some of the editing, but like minor, the score, the sound effects. I know a lot of people have been talking about the sound design. How much you can hear the Batman suit. It's beautiful stuff. It's really cool. It's really detailed. So I was leaving the theater and I was kind of bummed because I didn't love the movie either. I certainly loved aspects of it and I liked a lot of the overall thing. And so I kept thinking about it and I was like, I think that for me, it's not the execution because it's all 10 out of 10. It's all really well done by incredible filmmakers and actors and everybody. But it's just like maybe some of the idea and sort of the take on its own, like the initial take that Matt Reeves has on this world, for me, didn't grab me. It didn't move me emotionally. I wanted to be moved emotionally a little bit more. And maybe we can talk about some of those specifics. And I think it's still a movie that, because it is a reboot, it has that thing that a lot of movies like this have to kind of contend with, which is, okay, we want the audience to pretend that no other Batman movie has ever existed, right? Like to really kind of neuralize yourself, erase your memory, then go into this and then experience this for what it is. But at the same time, you're watching it as an audience member and I couldn't help but think about the decisions being made and going, I feel like those decisions were made because previous Batman movies existed that made different decisions. And so they're making different decisions. And so, just like at the story level and at the sort of take. I feel like even from the beginning of this, Matt Reeves probably came in, had conversations with Warner Brothers. They were like, hey, can you make a film with this version of Batman? It was the Ben Affleck Batman. And Matt Reeves was like, no, I cannot. It doesn't vibe with what my take is on the character. And I'm blown away that Warner Brothers was like, that's cool. Just do another thing on your own. Like, that's insane. That's mind blowing to me. But at the same time, I feel like Matt Reeves' take, he's doing things in response to Zack Snyder's take on Batman, Christopher Nolan's take on Batman, Tim Burton's take on Batman. He's kind of in conversation with all of those when he makes his movie. And some of it I really appreciated. And there's a specific story plot that I love that I want to talk about. But other sort of versions of his take on the character, I didn't quite love with some of the tone and some of the I think it also comes down to, like, I love the movie Zodiac and I don't usually love that genre. I don't usually love the thriller, the sort of like true crime. I don't usually love that stuff, but Fincher's Zodiac is, I think, a masterpiece. And that movie grabs me from minute one and just grabs me by the bolas and takes me the whole 3 hours. And I'm like, I don't know. This is incredible. And they don't even solve the damn thing by the end of that movie. But what's interesting is even the idea of Matt Reeves coming in being like, okay, I'm going to take that vibe and I'm going to overlay it onto the Riddler and Batman. I don't even know if I love that initial idea. Was the execution great? Yeah, it kind of was. Like, I think this movie is the best version of that idea, and it does feel like Matt Reeves' vision. And it does. It's not a compromised movie at all. It really, I think that again, that's part of it. Is I think Warner Brothers, and I hope they're listening. They really messed up a couple years ago with a director named Zack Snyder. They really messed up by messing with his movie, and then they brought in another guy who, by all accounts, was a huge piece of shit, and like it just continued to taint the entire thing. It sucks. It sucks for everyone involved. I feel horrible for everybody involved. And so I think that movies since then have really been Warner Brothers being like, yeah, okay, you do whatever you want.
Right.
For better or for worse. It's like there's nobody coming in from any side, it feels like, from like DC Comics with any kind of agenda of DC Comics characters portrayal coming in and affecting these movies, for better or for worse. You get the full director's vision. So either you vibe with it or it's not for you, but you can at least say, hey, their movie wasn't messed with. Good on them. They knocked it out of the park. You could tell what Matt Reeves' idea for this was, and they did it. So
Matt Reeves has even said that. He says, like, the cut you see in the theater, that is the final. That is my final cut. There's no extended cut. There will be some deleted scenes, he said, but the cut you see is what you're getting.
I wouldn't be surprised if after everything that's happened with Zack Snyder, if Warner Brothers wasn't like, you want to make this movie longer? Please make it as long as you want. We don't want.
You need a 6-hour miniseries? Like, what do you?
We don't want anybody on the internet to accuse us of anything. Please make it as long as you want.
Yeah.
God.
You're right, Adam. There was that interview with him when he was just laid it all out. He's like, no, this is the cut. If I could have made it longer, I wouldn't have. So yeah, you're right, Hector. That is exactly. It feels honest. It feels like maybe he had this story brewing for a long time, and it's very much based off several comics, which is great.
Yeah.
I do feel like this is a great take on the character, but I feel like now we need to talk about spoilers because there's just some saucy bits that we need to get.
It is time to talk about the sauciest bits in the business.
Bits.
So if you have not seen this movie yet, don't chart into the spoiler territory. Go see the movie first. I think we're all I don't think we'll ever not recommend a movie unless it's an absolutely abysmal piece of trash. But everyone should go see this movie, experience it for yourself in IMAX and Dolby once or twice, and of course come back and watch the spoiler section. With that out of the way, who wants to?
If you're still here, I feel sorry for you.
I want to talk about the main thing that I loved is one of the themes or one of the messages in the film. One of the things that I think Matt Reeves, I think this is why he did not make the Batman movie with Ben Affleck, which is his Batman does not kill people, and I love that about this movie. His Batman makes it a point to prevent Selena Kyle from killing someone. Several times makes the point not to kill people and says if we cross that line, we're no better than them. And I think it works. I think Matt Reeves also challenges this notion a little bit because he's like, sure. My Bruce Wayne is going to have this no kill rule, but he's going to wail on dudes in the middle of the night to the point where you're really going to be like, that's enough, Batman. Like you are
about to cross this line.
You have anger issues. Augustine, like you said, you're mourning. You're just going out every night trying to get revenge because your parents were killed. It's similar to the Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield. The first Amazing Spider-Man movie, his Uncle Ben, Martin Sheen, gets killed. And that's why he designs a spider suit, the mask, the sunglasses to go out and find the blonde guy with the tattoo who killed his uncle. And he keeps wailing on those guys until the lizard attacks. And then he saves the little kid from the car. And then the dad asks him, who are you? And he's like, I'm Spider-Man. And then from that point, he's like, you know what? My job is actually to save people. That's my job. And it took 3 hours for Robert Pattinson Batman to learn that same lesson in this movie. But he does turn from I go out every night and I want to scare the shit out of criminals to at the end of the film being like, actually my job is I have to go cut that wire. I don't want these people to be electrocuted. I'm going to go save these people out of this, rubble. This is my job. Oh, okay. This is the hope that I can provide the city. And I really appreciated that. So I think that's that was great.
Going back to that beginning part specifically, I loved the intro of this movie. A Batman narration would not necessarily be something that I would have gravitated towards, but I actually found it like really refreshing because I feel like it immediately gave us an into who this Bruce Wayne character was. Because really, he's not Bruce Wayne and Batman. He's kind of just Batman in this movie, or he's Bruce Wayne with a mask who runs around kicking the shit out of people.
Yeah,
he hasn't really developed.
Riddler makes that same point. He makes the same point because this is your real face, and I think that's a great Batman take. Yep.
Yeah, and I think because he's only in his second year of crime fighting, and this movie only takes place over the course of like a week. I think it's October 31st to like November 6th. We really only get like a tiny look into what his crime fighting life has been like for the last 2 years. So yeah, he has not established all of his, because I think the philanthropic Bruce Wayne, it is a persona of sorts, because I think like he is putting a mask over all of the pain and the anguish and the anger he feels, but also he is trying to, like at the end of the movie, he says, I can be the hope that the city needs. So I think like that's how he starts to build this other persona where he can use Bruce Wayne and Batman to do good for the city, just in different ways. So I love the fact that he is still kind of figuring that out. The opening of that movie like really kind of cements that, because when he's narrating, he's talking about how the symbol just strikes fear into the heart of people, and you just see villains looking down alleys being absolutely petrified to go down. I'm like, this feels like such a horror movie.
It was also great that the opening was the perspective of Riddler. Yeah. But you think with Batman. Some sort of high-tech goggles, I'm like, is this Batman spying on this family? Yeah. Is this? And then there was like a dad who got hugged by a kid, and the kid left, and you're like, is this dad Thomas Wayne? You know, like you're going through all this stuff,
so many questions. Finally,
so many questions. So finally, you get to this room with the guy, and he's watching TV, and you see like eyes in the shadows, and you're like, "Ooh, is this Batman? Is he about to step out?" But it's the Riddler. Dude. So just to see those eyes in the shadow. Then when you get to the criminals running around at night and they spray paint something and they look into shadows, you're like, okay, which one of these shadows is Batman going to be in?
Right.
because you know he's going to step out of one. So you feel the fear of like, oh damn, actually, yeah, every shadow in Gotham
Terrifying.
has Batman lurking in it. So it worked. It worked in that way. Yeah.
And especially the Riddler reveal. You know, like for me, being someone who like loves horror, that was such a throwback to like 80s slasher, and like very Zodiac too. But I love that stuff so much. And then the juxtaposition of Batman doing it and like your mood completely changing because now you're excited that the hero's stepping out. And it's so funny too, because that scene, I compared it to Eli Roth's reveal in Inglourious Bastards when he comes out of the tunnel with the baseball bat and he's like knocking the baseball bat on the wall, and you're realizing, oh shit, something massive is about to go down. And then you have Batman, his like almost like cowboy walk out of the tunnel. I loved all that stuff so much. And I think like that's something that for me, I really enjoyed, because I know that the tone has been something that a lot of people have been talking about. I would say that it pushes, like The Dark Knight was a pretty darker tone for Batman, but this like goes even farther than that.
Yeah, I honestly think that there's a lot of nuance in that PG-13 rating, but watching this movie, I'm like, it feels tonally like it's an R film. It feels like
it really does.
Like,
like it's skating on the line so close.
At no point were Matt Reeves and everybody involved thinking about 15-year-olds and younger. They were like, nah, fuck them, fuck those kids. They can't see this movie. Fully. Yeah. So
you're right.
Which I know is like has been a really big topic of conversation for a lot of people. And for me, it's like a hard thing to answer, because yes, I would love to see a Batman that exists in a shared universe that is kind of for all ages. And I thought that that's what we were going to get when we had all that whole interconnected universe, and it's not what we're getting, and who knows what the future holds. So for this Batman, I was kind of like, well, yeah, I guess it's kind of free reign to do whatever you want, because this is not going to be in an interconnected universe as of now. So I guess, yeah, you can't really ask for a director to be like, well, just make sure that it's available and kind of approachable for all ages. And I feel like that's a really hard thing to ask of a filmmaker, especially with Matt Reeves.
That's a really
because the Apes movies,
a good way to kneecap somebody.
The Apes movies are very adult oriented. Like I don't know if they go as like hard as Batman does at points, but it is very much for a more mature, developed audience who can really like live in that world and that story.
Yeah. I think his Apes movies definitely have a bleak, very post-apocalyptic tone. Yeah. But I do think that there is, maybe it's just because the apes themselves are CG. Maybe it's because I'm like, the original Planet of the Apes, and I know this doesn't really mean anything, but was rated PG, the original Charlton Heston one. And that movie is F up. That movie is like scary. Like, it's not really for kids, but kids saw the hell out of it. Matt Reeves saw it and grew up with it and loved it. I don't want to say that like if a studio were to ask a filmmaker to make a PG-13 movie that it is necessarily kneecapping, but I do want to say that like Matt Reeves just has no interest in that. They didn't stifle him. They didn't have a problem with it. I just think it comes down to Matt Reeves. I think if Matt Reeves came to Warner Brothers and said, well, here's my take, it's more of a PG-13, this is my version, it's more kind of accessible, I still think Warner Brothers would have let him, it would have been like, yeah, go for it, do that movie. I just think that Matt Reeves doesn't think of his version of Batman as that. I think he really thinks of his version of Batman as like, well, my Batman is going to be in Zodiac or in Chinatown or in one of these noir things, and all the all those influences. Kids don't watch that shit. When he's like, my Batman's going to be influenced by David Fincher. It's like, okay, that's not for children, and
not at all.
How many followers does he have on TikTok?
Yeah. Not for the young one.
Yeah, no, but it's very true. And I think like yesterday I posted a tweet and I was like, 4 movies that I desperately wanted to watch after I watched The Batman: Good Time, Prisoners, Zodiac, and Seven. Those are for movies that majority people who, well, I don't want to say majority, I don't want to say that, but there are a lot of people who probably watch our content probably haven't seen most of those movies. But those were 4 movies that I watched or I've seen before. And when I watched The Batman, I'm like, oh my God, yes, these are like, well, Good Time mostly because Robert Pattinson's really good in it. But Prisoners is an amazing crime thriller. So is
Dano.
Seven, and so is the Zodiac. So I'm like, yeah, these are like more of that type of stuff. But I do wonder how this kind of like sets the stage going forward, because there are shows that are happening on HBO Max with Penguin, GCPD. We know now that they're doing an Arkham one. There's that big spoiler or teaser at the end with Barry Keoghan's Joker that I'm like, I'm slightly mixed feelings about that, but so I'm really curious to see whether or not Matt Reeves is the type of director who will embrace a Bat family. Like, if you're gonna do it, like, give us the whole thing or don't do it at all. Yeah. But we'll see. But this Joker,
did you hear about what Pattinson said about getting a Robin and getting somebody with him? He said that if he does have a Robin, he wants it to be along the death in the family storyline, with a 13-year-old Robin, and I'm just like, is that really the best call right now? Like, I don't know if we necessarily need that. I mean, sure, we have no reason not to give it to you, but like, is that really what you want your Batman to be involved in right now in year 3 of his career?
I feel like there's a lot of time before we get into that, before we get into those types of stories.
Tons of time.
Yeah.
How do you guys feel about that Joker cameo?
Well, first of all, Barry Keoghan, he's such a great actor. He's also rumored to be a very important character in Dune Part 2. There's a character we haven't met yet in the Dune world, and if you watch the original 80s Dune movie, musician Sting is in the film, and he plays one of the bad guys, one of the Harkonnens. That character did not show up in Dune Part 1. Yeah, there's rumors that it's going to be Barry, and he was like kind of coy about it and kind of shy about it, and he's like, yeah, that'd be great, that'd be cool if I could go and do that. You know, those guys love Denis, I love Dune. You know, his Irish self, but so I'm stoked for his career.
Yeah,
and I also am like,
he was a cool guy.
He seems like such a great guy, and I'm also like, it's not as important of a character as Joker. I'm like, I still want to see him in Eternals too. Like his take on that Eternals character Druig was super cool. Yeah, he's such a great actor. I can't wait to see him mix it up and
go watch Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Yeah, I'm very happy for the young guy. He's really talented.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that it was at the end of the film, because it feels like out of everything in this movie, that felt the most comic booky and seed planty. And it's almost like Matt Reeves spent the whole 3 hours being like, this isn't that kind of movie. And then at the end he goes, well, except for this thing, because I love the Joker. And so I'm like, okay, as long as you're not forcing it, man, as long as it's also, and I don't think he was, and I don't think anybody at Warner Brothers was like, dude, we want a third Joker. We want a third actor to play that. Nobody, I don't think Warner Brothers was doing that.
At this point, I think it's like the fifth actor, but yeah.
I mean the third Joker since 2016. Like we want a third Joker in play currently. Like that's what we want. I also hope that the Riddler being the main villain in this wasn't a choice that Matt Reeves made because we haven't seen the Riddler since 1995. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And I feel like maybe there was, and if it was Matt Reeves truly making a Batman film in a vacuum, if he could somehow magically erase everybody's memory, would his first movie have had the Joker? Would it have been Barry? Or, I'm looking forward to it, but I will say that I don't have the same sort of like excitement or spicy hot takes or our theories or ideas as to what this world could build into the way I do with other comic book movies. You know, I can get out of basically any MCU movie. I feel sometimes like I can almost clock what the next major beats are going to be, the next characters to introduce. Like that's a fun part of that series of movies too. And I think I'm trying to compliment Matt Reeves, because I'm like, this whole movie was kind of a surprise, and I'm not sitting down and being like, okay, so here's what it should be, because I just feel like that's not my job as a fan with this type of movie. Warner Brothers is not going to promise me deliver anything. Like none of it is set in stone. Like I'm not going to get this Batman to morph into the Batman that I maybe prefer, which is basically the Kevin Conroy animated series version. Those are so vastly different that I'm not going to sit here and try to put a square peg into a round hole to get, I'm not going to be like, okay, well, if he fights this character next and then this and then this, then he can meet his Superman. And it's just like, I guess we're back into Christopher Nolan territory. So Matt Reeves, do 3 movies or whatever you want. And then whenever you want to walk away, they'll be done. No one's going to come in and do Robert Pattinson Batman 3 without you, Matt Reeves, it seems like. So I'm just along for the ride, and I don't want to get ahead of myself. I don't want to put all my eggs in this basket as a fan, and I don't want to, but it doesn't mean I'm not supportive. So that's kind of how I feel about the future of it all. I am really interested in the GCPD show, because Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon in this, I loved him. I love the way he said, I don't even know who you are, man. Like just calling him man. Give me a second, man. Listen, chief, and the fact that he seems to be the only not corrupt cop. Yeah. And the fact that he's black, I'm like, there's gotta be some stuff you can say there.
One of the best scenes in that movie was when he's like, give us a minute. We gotta get you out of here.
When they're like coyly talking to each other about the escape plan. So great.
Then he punches him and runs out, and then the next thing he's like, Couldn't pull your
Not gonna
punches.
pull your punch.
I did. I'm like, I love this.
You did pull my punch. I'm so
Yeah,
strong.
that was great.
Well,
I'm so strong. I'm Batman. I'm so strong.
I feel like that's been always a mostly like pretty, I would say, minus the Burton Schumacher movies, because they didn't really focus on the relationship with Gordon and Batman. But I do feel like since the Christopher Nolan movies, like I love that we've made it such a point to focus on the relationship with Gordon, whether he's a lieutenant, sergeant, commissioner, whatever, and Batman, because it is such a important piece, especially for this movie, because it really feels like this movie's whole objective is to establish how just crooked and broken Gotham City is. And Batman desperately needs an ally that he can rely on. And I love the fact that we've always, or at least for the last like 15 years, we've really focused on the Jim Gordon-Batman relationship. There's any person in the world who was like, I wasn't into this casting when they first announced it, but he's great. I'm like, you're fucking crazy. He's amazing.
I was disappointed and let down by Andy Serkis's Alfred. He is great in the movie. I wanted more of him. I was a little let down because the point in the movie where he almost dies, I thought, because again, this is not connected to any future thing. This is not interconnected. This is it hasn't been guaranteed a sequel. I was like, oh shit, they might kill Alfred in this, and that could be their take on, that's what I thought. But I wasn't as emotionally moved. I wanted to cry when Bruce Wayne goes to talk to him. And it's such a dumb minor thing, but even when he says, I never thought I'd feel that fear again, of like the way I felt fear when I lost my parents, but then I didn't want to lose somebody I cared about.
Yeah.
I wanted Bruce Wayne to say, I didn't want to lose somebody I loved. It's such a minor, tiny thing, but I'm like, I wanted, and that goes back to how Bruce Wayne sort of depicted in this film, and Pattinson does such a great job. But I think that this version of Bruce Wayne is like, I just wanted him to love as much as he had the anger and the passion. And because he was so cold and so reserved, and he had some great horniness with Selena Kyle, and maybe cared about her too, but it was definitely like a physical thing. It was, but then again, that relationship was really interesting because she challenged him on his beliefs and his understanding of the world, clocking him so easy. Choices? You think my friend made a choice? You must be rich. Because that's how rich people talk.
Yeah, you must have grown up rich. I'm like, oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, he did. He absolutely did. And he apologized for what he said, and she's like, it's fine. And it's the Bruce Alfred relationship. I still think that the reason I didn't love the movie is because I am bringing all of my Batman understanding and context with me. And it's difficult because, I know you're supposed to judge a movie for what it is, not for what it isn't. But again, this movie does not exist in a vacuum. It does live in a world that is in conversation with Zack Snyder's take on Batman, where he kills people. And this one's like, no. And it's in conversation with the Christopher Nolan version of Batman, and it's still trying to forge a new path, but also like, I still need to explain how Robert Pattinson, who is his height, his weight, can have that much strength and beat the crap out of people. And it's a combination of rage, but then also Alfred says, I taught you how to fight. And this Alfred is like that Batman Earth One, who's like, I was in the Royal Armed Forces or whatever. Like I was in the RAF, like I was in the British, military. So I know how to fight. Oh, so you're okay. This Batman he never did the Christopher Nolan ninja thing. He was just taught how to fight by Andy Serkis and starts going out at night and beating the shit out of people. I just would love to see a Batman someday where Bruce acknowledges Alfred is my father. Like my father was Thomas Wayne, my mother was Martha Wayne, and they died. And then Alfred's also my father. Like he raised me. And I would love to get to a point in a Batman story where he can have that much sort of like emotion and heart and love that he raises Dick, and he goes, Dick is my son. Like I love him and I raised him. He's my son and I'm his father. And this is one way that I helped Gotham, is one direct way with one individual, one kid. And in a way, now my mission is successful, because I saved this kid the way I wasn't saved. And to have that kind of thing. And I think that this young Batman, this young Bruce Wayne, is very emo. He's very frustrated. And he's very ignorant, but not in a bad way. He just doesn't know about, the way that the world works. And this movie tries to really kind of confront him with some of that. But then I will say this: I was frustrated, kind of because of the great John Turturro scene where he's like, "Your dad asked me to kill somebody, and I did it." And we learn this, and I'm like, this is so interesting that they're really painting Thomas Wayne in this light. And then we cut to Andy Serkis, and he's like, "No, that wasn't true. Your father was a good man." And I'm kind of like, okay, well then, it still feels like in a world where things are so dark and gritty, the Waynes are still sort of untouched. and they're still kind of perfect and pure. Even if Martha Wayne was in and out of Arkham, that just means she had mental health issues.
Right.
And did Bruce Wayne inherit some of those? Yeah, probably. Yeah, he needs help, and he probably didn't get it. But I still wouldn't have minded if a Batman movie did say straight up, Thomas Wayne did ask somebody to kill somebody, straight up, and now Bruce Wayne has to deal with that, because it could be a metaphor for when you learn that people in your family are pieces of shit. When you learn that if you come from money, how did you get that money? Sometimes not through great ways. And people who come from old money,
how do you deal with
can
that?
almost always go to those people and go, okay, so how do you come from old money? Okay, sure. At one point, your family were slave owners, like some messed up stuff in the history of your richness that you have to like deal with. And how will Bruce Wayne make up for the sins of his father? Some of those story choices and how they're having Bruce kind of hold back with his emotions, and it left me a little bit cold, and I wanted to be moved, and I wanted to cry. And when I look at Matt Reeves' Ape movies, there's so much emotion in those movies, man. When Caesar talks to his son and they put forehead to forehead, little moments like that, I could cry. I could watch his Dawn of the Apes, War of the Apes.
You could, or you do.
I have, and I will, my friend. I could cry, and I have cried watching those movies, and I will again. And I wanted to feel that with this one, but I think that the point of the movie is that Bruce is so reserved and so kept in, and his
wall is massive.
His wall, and it kind of prevented me a little bit from connecting to Bruce. So for me, the biggest letdown was basically just the way that Bruce was depicted in the film, because Selena Kyle was awesome. Riddler, we can talk about that, but Paul Dano was awesome. James Gordon was awesome. Carmine Falcone, Peter Sarsgaard with his like Gotham District Attorney,
Coulson,
he was great. He was great.
Colin Farrell as the Penguin.
Now here's why I think he was such a highlight, because he was fun. In a movie that isn't as fun as other comic book movies, he comes in and he's like,
"Hey, vengeance!
Come on, wait, cop,
He calls them out on their bad Spanish.
Is this Riddler an idiot? Is he some kind of moron? He doesn't know the difference."
It's so good.
Those prosthetics are unbelievable, unreal. Like, holy shit!
Could win an Oscar. Yeah, I'm leaving the movie with Abby, and Abby was talking about what she liked, and she goes, "The guy who played the Penguin was great." I'm like, "The guy who played the Penguin?" I'm like, "It's Colin Farrell, right?" And she's like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, that was Colin Farrell." She's like, "I did not know that."
Oh, it's amazing.
He was
that's
so
good. That's a character I'm excited to see explored in his own show. I don't remember the Penguin show as a prequel to the Batman movie, but regardless, like I'm super excited to see more of that character, because he was so freaking good. And to see him, if it is a prequel, to see him how he becomes Carmine Falcone's right hand man could be really interesting and cool. And this chip on his shoulder that I'm really like, I'm into it.
He should have him start the show as good looking Colin Farrell, and then by the end of it, like slowly but surely, like he's gaining
into
weight,
the Penguin,
losing hair, like his, something happens to his face. That would be great.
But to your point about the Alfred Bruce relationship, I definitely felt the same. And I know that the only reason I reacted the way I did to Alfred potentially dying is because I am bringing that history, that comic book movie history of like, oh my God, this is Bruce Wayne's father. You can't also take him out. But I can totally see someone who kind of goes in cold and has some idea of the relationship between those two characters will kind of feel like, oh, this is very sudden. This feels like not necessarily that developed, because we don't have that many scenes with those characters. I do love that Alfred is helping him try to decipher the riddles. Like that is super fun. I love all that stuff. I do love the pull from Earth One. It's really weird. I think maybe that's why I liked this movie so much, was because I know that in some of the trailers that we've talked about, I've mentioned that like I'd love to see Martha be in Arkham and, like really root Bruce's history into Gotham City. I'd love to see Alfred be the Earth One version, where he was a former SAS member and he was the bodyguard for the Waynes and blah, blah, blah. I hope that it does more Thriller, blah. So like all these things that surprisingly I was like, I want this. I got it in this movie. So I think that's probably why I have like slightly rose-tinted glasses, and I'm kind of like forgiving. Like there are definitely things about the movie that I'm like, this didn't really work for me, but I got a lot of what I was hoping for. The Riddler, for example, the fact that we got to see Batman really go into detective mode was really cool. I loved watching him and Gordon and Alfred and kind of all the people around him try to figure out exactly, because for a while you think, at least I thought, is he trying to decipher Batman's identity? What exactly is he trying to do? And I felt like that part of the story really worked for me.
I think my favorite thing that this movie did was finally in movie format make the connection as to why Batman and Bruce is so connected to the city. Because like typically what you see when somebody, you know, has trauma, they usually run from it. It's usually some kind of escapism that happens. I really, really dig the fact that they had that shot of Batman being the beacon of light in the darkness after the flood. Like they are in there, the flood happens, they're in the stadium. He turns his flare on. The first thing he does is he goes to the people and he gets them out of the rubble and he's like, follow me. And they all start following him. And there was a fantastic shot, the downward facing shot of them moving out. But in retrospect, like this is him actually connecting with the people that he's supposed to be so attached to, because Gotham is the city, but it's, he always says it's also the people. And so to finally have a Batman in which he's like, I am attached to these people and I have to be here for these people because there's even worse people out there that are going to try to harm innocents. And then that other shot as well, where he's carrying the girl to the rescue helicopter and having her getting carried off. That moment of her reaching back to Batman and saying, hey, you're my safety. Like you helped me here. Are you going to be there if it happens again?
I got emotional during that moment.
Yeah. And I think I feel like that was maybe part of the pitch. And because they hit it so well at that moment where I was just like, this is what Batman needs to be into the future going on, because otherwise he's just an angry dude with a cool suit just kicking people's asses, right? Like the motivation for Batman has always been Gotham and justice and all this stuff, but you never show who he's getting justice for. Like, yeah, it's a personal vendetta, but it's also like there's a bigger picture out there. And the fact that they made this a point in the movie, and also like right at the climax, this is really what he was fighting for. And he didn't know he was fighting for it as well. Like he didn't realize it was his thing until he was there for the people. I feel like that was really what kind of made me really, really like this movie, because that was ultimately the message of a mourning man healing at least a little bit, you know. And to go back to your point, Hector, of maybe why you didn't connect with him and Alfred, like maybe there was a time in which, or I mean, clearly he's not accepted what happened to him, and therefore maybe can't accept Alfred as a dad at this point yet, because he's like, look, my dad was ripped away from me, and how can I accept, you know, as kind as Alfred is, as such a resource that Alfred is to him, he's not ready to accept Alfred as a dad. And maybe I'm hoping that if this is a trilogy, that's the arc overall. Like they get to connect more in the second movie, and then by the third one, like if anything happens to Alfred, we're just like heartbroken, because these two are just so interconnected,
connected at the hip.
Yeah, hopefully it's a bigger arc that we're going to see throughout the rest of the movie. But
I think you're right, Augustine. I think I was thinking about that too. I was like, look at Marissa Tomei's Aunt May and how she was in 3 Spider-Man movies, and then what happened to her character in Spider-Man No Way Home and how it affected Peter. And I'm like, that could also be, and Marissa Tomei in the first 2 Spider-Man movies, you're also bringing a lot of the cultural knowledge and baggage of Aunt May to those movies, you know, like you're definitely still thinking about Rosemary Harris or Sally Field, and then you're bringing it to this film. So I think that's possible. I also want to say too, like I may end up liking this movie more after a sequel comes out, because the exact same thing happened with Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight came out and it was so fantastic that it only enhanced what they did with those characters in Batman Begins. And when you go back and rewatch, you're like, oh, how cool that they're kind of leading to this sort of setting this up. So like I would expect a lot of that to happen if they do a part 2. How I feel about the movie. I think I really like, I'm still kind of like thinking about Riddler, and Paul Dano was wonderful, and I think super scary, but I also like that they made the Riddler basically like a straight white man incel on the internet, and he hooked up with other of those guys, and they became the Riddler, and they became Vengeance, and Batman saw that and was like, man, I'm like these guys. I don't want to be like these guys. And I think it was really smart and kind of brave for them to connect this villain and a villain to that kind of man on the internet, because it's real. It's just white guys that are talking to each other, and they're like, here's how you make C4, here's how to get the guns, here's how you do this, here's how you do that, because terrorists? You know, terrorists, because it's like a real threat in the United States, and something that the US has to contend with because of the way the media treats lone gunmen, or you know, these white guys that get guns and they kill people, and they always protect the kind of the whiteness of it. They always protect, you know, the gun control aspect of it. They protect all these things happens a lot of the times in the media, and things have been shifting. So to see this in a movie this way, depicted this way, it's awesome.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm watching the movie and I'm like, there's so much to do with Falcone and Maroni and all these past events.
Mhm.
I almost wish the movie was more Riddler, was more, you know, getting to understand who this character is and seeing Paul Dano, and because it was so much of the mask and so much of the terror behind it that you know, my brain was going, man, I don't want to see Jim Carrey Riddler again, but I would like to see something that's maybe a little bit more comic booky, you know. And what's interesting is I like that he didn't know who Batman was, even though that scene made you think he did.
Oh, that was such a good scene.
Bruce
My
Wayne.
cheeks
It's a
were
great
puckering.
scene.
I was like, oh, no,
my
oh
God.
no.
Yeah, yeah.
And then Pattinson goes to Gordon, you're a good cop, because he's like, I'm about to be outed.
Yeah.
And it's not even the case.
Maybe I was being too cynical, but I'm like, it's funny how he doesn't figure it out. But should the Riddler, who is this smart, because he was incredibly smart, should he have figured it out? Is it part of the suspension of disbelief, the same way that, you know, Clark Kent and Superman is part of the suspension of disbelief in these superhero stories? That like, if you're gonna tell me, Matt Reeves, that your Riddler is the smartest, scariest version of this character ever, my first thing I'm gonna think is like, oh, for sure, then he must have figured out that Batman is Bruce Wayne. Then what's the story from here? And were they gonna do the trick that they pulled at the end of the comic Batman Hush, which I like this trick. I don't know if I fully buy it in a movie like this. When Riddler does figure out that Batman's Bruce Wayne, Batman says, "What do you call it? A riddle that everyone knows the answer to." Or something, and Riddler's like, it's worthless, and Batman's like, exactly. So then Riddler's like, oh shit, now I can't tell anybody because now then it would be worthless. So I thought that was going to happen in the movie, but it didn't end up happening. So it's always fun how like the Christopher Nolan take and this take, they claim to have the most sophisticated and smart adult take on Batman, but there's still comic booky shit in it.
Part of me also wonders if they made that choice because it's not necessarily what the movie, like it's not about Riddler discovering the identity. Because I know that there was a version of the Riddler where he was like a GCPD cop, I think, and he was obsessed with finding out the identity of Batman. But I think for this movie, it wasn't so much about that. It was more about unraveling sort of the nasty history of Gotham City and how someone who is so because of his connection with I guess that was my one little gripe with the movie was his connection to Bruce Wayne. I was like, okay, we're kind of forcing this in here a little bit, that he was like, why he has this vendetta against Bruce Wayne. I understand for the story why they did it, but not necessarily the most like original concept and idea, but it helped support why Bruce Wayne's family history is intertwined in this story. I really did enjoy Paul Dano, and I'm gonna keep telling people to go watch Prisoners, because if you haven't seen it yet,
this is an actor
It's a watch,
Paul Dano is good in every single thing he's in. I mean, my favorite is just the heartwarming Little Miss Sunshine. It's still a great movie.
I think it is the heartwarming Swiss Army Man.
Swiss Army Man. The heartwarming Prisoners is Little Miss Sunshine, man. It's
family favorite. Prisoners.
Augustine, what are your overall thoughts? Anything else you want to say about the movie?
Honestly, this conversation probably make me like the movie more.
I will say we've all only seen it once so far, correct?
I've seen
Adam
it twice.
saw it twice.
Adam saw it twice. Okay, great. I want to see it again.
I
don't even know what my final.
I'll go again.
Yeah, I don't know what my final sort of like rating or take on the movie is too. You know, I know people have been sharing their Batman movie rankings, and I'm like, I want to do that too, but I want to rewatch them and figure out how I feel about them. And
I agree. Final thoughts is that this movie is definitely worth a watch. There was a lot. I think Matt Reeves' take on this was very well thought out, and I think that it's setting up. It's got a lot of great potentiality. Basically, like this cinematic trio or whatever we're going to get from it could be one of the greatest cinematic takes on Batman that we've seen. Overall, I like this take on Batman. You need to go see it again, and I will probably end up loving this take on Batman after I, really mull it over after the second watch. But I always recommend people to go out and make up their own minds.
We didn't even get a chance to talk about the technical feats of this movie. Like technically, it's an incredibly well made film.
Let's save that for the podcast, man. We gotta really get into
Batmobile made me
and they
feel
filmed
things that I haven't felt in a while.
They filmed like 3/4 of it during COVID and lockdowns, and they had the Mandalorian tech to film the sort of like you're up on a building and Gotham is behind you, and all of that stuff is super cool. My overall thoughts are I want to see it again. I want to continue to feel it out and see how I feel about it. I didn't love the depiction of Bruce Wayne, some of the tonal choices for the movie, the Rorschach narration for real is something I think I did not enjoy. You know, but it's an interesting film that first of all, I do love the theme of corruption and what we can do as individuals, and you know how we need to kind of lift ourselves up. And it's a movie that does shine a light on a bunch of real world problems in the US right now, while still having kick-ass fun action shit. So I need to watch it again. And if I fall on, hey, it's really well done, but it's not for me and it's not my favorite, that's okay. I still think I rank these above the Tim Burton films of the 80s and 90s, the Joel Schumacher, Tim Burton movies, but I still think it might rank below the Christopher Nolan take, those three films. I think that those three movies kind of deliver a little bit more of what I tend to gravitate towards. So the future is bright, though. We'll see what they do with it. I'm really looking forward to it, especially because I didn't love the runtime. I think that it worked for the movie, but I've seen people say, if this was on HBO Max and you watch an hour a night, would you have enjoyed it more? And I think about that, and I'm like, maybe, because it does feel like it also feels like it could work as kind of a really juicy limited series, an HBO sit down, watch an episode, you know, oh man, I can't wait till tomorrow night. Like that still works too. And the GCPD show and the Penguin show could feel like that, but longer, which is really exciting. Even if it ain't for me, man, I want everybody to go and love it and enjoy it. And you know, will Hector ever get the DC animated universe in live action? Probably not at this point.
Who knows?
That's okay.
I believe Hector goes and works at Warner Brothers as an executive.
Yeah, exactly.
It's okay because it's right here. You know, Kevin Conroy will always be my Batman.
Exists.
I love that man, and they exist. It's all there. So maybe someday, guys, maybe the three of us, maybe we'll watch Batman the Animated Series together on this channel. I don't know if you guys would like to see that.
Maybe.
Drop a little comment below. Maybe that's something we could go and revisit. Adam, finish us off, my friend. Your overall thoughts.
Loved this movie. There's so much in there was for me, and I totally understand it's not for a lot of people. It worked for me. I had a really fun time. Runtime did not bother me, and I want to go see it again in Dolby Cinema. Oh, it was so great. But yeah, just so many things that I love about this. But talking about a movie like this is so hard because we have a limited time.
Yeah.
And I could easily spend 3 hours just talking about the movie and the technical wizardry. But we will talk about it more in the Checkskins podcast because I think it's worth talking about and discussing and breaking down a little bit more. But in the meantime, if you enjoy the review, let us know your thoughts about the movie. Try to keep it spoiler free if you can, because I know there's a lot of people who probably have not seen the film yet. Subscribe if you haven't already. Check out everything that we're doing on Patreon, and we'll see you guys in the next video.